Hello everyone, this is Dr. Ian. For today, I'm going to be sharing with you how I teach my students the beauty of trig identities and how we use it in simplifying and proving identities in our lesson on trigonometry. And I would have to say that simplifying trig identity and proving identity is one of my favorite topics or skills to teach my students. And it's basically, or the reason is because it's helping our students to think critically and to be able to connect their prior knowledge from algebra to what they're learning in trigonometry. And for today, I'm going to share with you my techniques on how I help my students on how to simplify and prove identities using the lesson that I do with my students in mathematics. So let's start with how I help my students to memorize the identities. So I always use the index card and make sure that my students are using the cheat sheet over and over and over again in our classwork, in our homework, and in our quizzes, or some of the quizzes, until they're ready to be on their own without their cheat sheets. So this is what we're going to be working on, factoring or using the factoring techniques on how we learn trig identities. And the first thing that I want to share with you is just like what I have explained a little bit in the previous slide, the cheat sheet that I'm using for my students. I know that my students are always allergic when I say memorize this or you have to memorize this. So to trick them, I always tell them that they can use their cheat sheet on the basic trig identities like the reciprocal identities, the quotient identity, and the Pythagorean identity. And once they are comfortable using them over and over and over again, they'll be memorizing the identities without them knowing it. And by constant practice and by seeing them frequently, most students will be able to memorize it eventually. And for those of you who are learning trigonometry for the first time, this tip is for you. And after you have mastered or hopefully memorized your trig identities, now you need to memorize, not memorize, but to refresh your memory on how to use your factoring technique. So factoring is essential in trigonometry, in calculus, in analytic geometry. So to be able to gain confidence on working with problems involving derivatives, proving identity, simplifying trig expressions, you need to know your factoring techniques, specifically your factoring by GCF, your sum and difference of two cubes, or your difference of two squares. And once you're comfortable in working with these factoring techniques, you'll be able to realize that mastery of the factoring techniques in algebra will help you understand the puzzle that you will be working on in trigonometry. And this is what we're going to be using in this particular problem that I am sharing here with you. Sine theta minus sine cube theta all over cosine squared theta. We'll be using factoring and some of the basic trig identity that we're going to see in our lesson on trigonometry. So first, we're going to be factoring our numerator because we know that sine theta minus sine cube theta can be factored out using the GCF, and our GCF here is sine theta. And now we are left with 1 minus sine squared theta in our numerator. And of course, cosine squared theta will still remain because we cannot simplify it anymore. Now, using your identity, so with your cheat sheet or your formula sheet, we know that 1 minus sine squared theta is equal to cosine squared theta. So now we can modify our 1 minus sine squared theta into cosine squared theta. And now we know that we can simplify our rational expression by getting rid of the cosine squared theta, and they are equal to 1. So we are now left with sine theta as our simplest form of sine theta minus sine cube theta all over cosine squared theta. So this is how we use our skill on factoring, our trig identity on reciprocal identity, and the Pythagorean identity. So using these techniques or using these number facts, we'll be able to simplify our complex expressions like this into sine theta. And again, it's all about practice and understanding how we're going to be using all these skill in this particular problem. So to recap, one, mastery of your trig identity is key in understanding trigonometry better. So make sure that you are using the reciprocal identity, Pythagorean identity, the quotient identity over and over and over again until you memorize them eventually. And of course, your factoring technique. And if you have any lesson ideas, share it to us, and hopefully we'll be able to learn something from you as well. And for those students who are mastering their trig identity, comment down below how you're memorizing your trig identities so that we can share to other students here in our channel in the future. So thank you once again for sharing your time with me. So in understanding the challenging world of trig identities or simplifying trig identity or proving identity, the key is practice. So we have our lessons in the description box below, so you can use that. You can use them for practicing, and for teachers, you can use all these lessons for your students so that we'll be able to help our kids to master the trig identities and to lessen their math anxiety when it comes to complex problems similar to what we did today. This is Dr. E, and see you again next time. Bye!